To this house we come bringing our boldest dreams, seeking here the inspiration and strength to make them be. To this house we come hoping to bury broken dreams, to be sustained through their pain, and to discover new ones amidst their tears. We come here lonely, isolated from meaningful human contact, searching for warmth and closeness and care. Needing to grow beyond plateaus of the commonplace, we seek here challenges and commitments productive of greater wholeness and deeper meanings. We come intense and constructed, hoping for encouragement to shed our pretenses and to be ourselves. Filled with despair and self-doubt, we seek affirmations prodding us to say yes to ourselves and to life. Somehow, always putting happiness ahead of ourselves, we enter this place trusting that what happens here will enable us to make and to accept a little bit of it now, today. Strange place, this house. Here we cry, sing, laugh, hurt, dance, touch, survive, celebrate, grow, search, doubt, hope, rejoice, pray, trust, care, learn, think, wonder, be, become. Yes, this morning to this house we come. At this time, we have an opportunity to light our candles of community. You can light a candle for a joy or a concern, or simply to bring more light into our space.
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey on. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey on. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey on.
Let us stand in body or spirit for the lighting of the chalice. By the light of this chalice, we prepare for the future. We prepare ourselves for the times of triumph and the times of trial that might come. We prepare ourselves to be present to one another with loving hearts, even in the most difficult of times. we prepare ourselves to make the connections that will lift us out of isolation and prepare the path of justice and equality. Let us join together in the spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. We light this peace candle to remind us of all the places in the world where there is no peace. Join me in saying the words on the screen. Lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. May be seated. Our opening thought and all of our readings before the discourse this morning come from Brian McLaren and his recent book, Life After Doom. McLaren writes, both hope and hopelessness can have surprisingly similar appeal. First, both relieve us from the uncertainty of an unknown future. For one, a happy ending is assumed. For the other, a tragic ending is inescapable. Either way, at least we know what's coming. Second, both promise us a future that asks nothing of us.
For
Our next reading from Brian McLaren's Life After Doom. We need to talk about doom. We need to grapple with doom. We need to face the scenarios of doom and do all we can to avoid the worst of the bad scenarios. But in the end, doom is not the point. The dream is. After doom runs its course, life will go on, perhaps without us humans, but I hope with us, a humbled and wiser version of us. So as we grapple with doom, please don't let doom have the last word. Focus on life and remember the dream. Tell them about the dream. Let us meditate on these words from Len Cox, A Web of Holy Relationships. Let us breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Spirit of life, who draws us together in a web of holy relationships, make your presence known with us and in us and among us. Remind us that we are not alone in history. Ignite us with the courage of the living tradition. Remind us that we are not alone in entering the future. Anchor us with patience and perseverance. Remind us that we are not alone in our times of grief and pain. Comfort us with your Spirit, manifest in human hands and voices. Remind us that we are not alone in joy and wonder. Inspire us to honor and extend the beauty we find in this world. Divine music of the universe, let our hearts beat in diverse and harmonious rhythms, cooperating with an everlasting dance of love. May we move with the rhythms of peace. May we move with the rhythms of compassion. May we move with the rhythms of justice. Source of stars and planets and water and land, open our hearts to all of our neighbors. Open our souls to a renewal of faith. Open our hands to join together in the work ahead. So be it. Blessed be. Amen. Our next reading from Brian McLaren's Life After Doom. Whatever happens to civilization as we know it, you and I, in our own wick, wax, and flame, can find and do what is ours to do right now, and shine magnificently as we can right now. Each year that we're given, each day that we're awake, each breath that we take, We don't need to know the plan in advance. We just need to walk our path. In the walking, step by step, the way will unfold like tendrils reaching out from a billion branches, seeking light. The ultimate destination, that is beyond both our control and our capacity to know. So here we are, savoring this gift of this day, in this life, in these times, waking up in the unfolding mystery, and that is gift enough, here and now. Those of you from my generation, maybe all of you have heard the Eagles song, Peaceful, Easy Feeling. Remember that one? The song was so popular when I was a young person that we used to sing the song Amazing Grace to the tune of Peaceful, Easy Feeling at church camp every summer. I'll spare you my singing of the song, but after each verse of Amazing Grace, we would sing a version of the chorus of Peaceful, Easy Feeling. You may remember the words, and I've got a peaceful, easy feeling, and I know you won't let me down because I'm already standing on the ground. I think in church camp we added solid ground just to make sure that we were being spiritual. Singing that song in church camp and at youth group is a nice memory for me, and I must admit that singing it together with my friends in junior high and high school gave me that peaceful, easy feeling that the song was all about. But when I look at the world today, when I look around us and look at the world today, I must admit that it does not give me that peaceful, easy feeling. The world right now is not giving me peaceful, easy feeling vibes. Borrowing words from author Brian McLaren's most recent book, titled Life After Doom, I'm getting more of what he calls, quote, an unpeaceful, uneasy, and unwanted feeling, end quote. Perhaps you are feeling it too, an awareness that things are not going well for humanity right now. Things are not going well for the earth, and there is a very real possibility that things are going to get worse, perhaps even much worse than they already are. Humanity, we, us, together, we have fallen into ways of being in the world that are not healthy, not desirable, and not good for persons or for the planet. We are warring with one another, we are exploiting one another, we are dehumanizing one another, and we are exploiting and despoiling the community of all creation. We have created a situation so dire that it seems that doom lies around every corner. Those who are awake to this reality may wish that they could go back to sleep and regain that peaceful, easy feeling. But once one is awake, it's almost impossible to ignore the fact that we as a people are walking through something akin to the darkest of valleys that the psalmist in Psalm 23 expresses so powerfully. You may remember the psalmist's words, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It's tempting to simply want to escape the unpeaceful, uneasy, and unwanted feeling of doom that we experience in the current dark valley of our human existence. We might distract ourselves from it through entertainment or consumption. We might simply ignore it. We might even acquiesce to it and simply hope for a better world in the life after. There are some who even seem to openly embrace the doom as a necessary chapter in an apocalyptic story that they believe will lead to a new heaven and a new earth. I've told you about my professor and friend Paula Fredrickson, a scholar of early Christianity for whom I was a teaching fellow during graduate school at Boston University. Fredrickson would often say, quote, "Happy people don't write apocalyptic stories," end quote. Apocalyptic stories are a coping mechanism for people who have lost hope that things will get better in this world without some major outside interference or intervention. This morning, I would like to invite us to accept Brian McLaren's suggestion that we ought to avoid the temptations of escaping, ignoring, or distracting ourselves from the unpeaceful, uneasy, and unwanted feelings of doom that we may be experiencing in our current dark valley of human existence. And instead, ask ourselves this: how can we boldly and courageously love one another in this dark valley? How can we carry one another in this dark valley? How can we help the most vulnerable among us in this dark valley? How can we work for peace and justice in this dark valley? How can we bring light and hope into this dark valley? How can we find ways to be together such that even in the midst of this dark valley, we will fear no evil and we will not succumb to hate and to darkness? How can we become a community that works together to express love, to do justice, and provide support for one another in the dark valley in which we currently find ourselves as humanity? In his book, Life After Doom, Brian McLaren outlines 4 possible scenarios for our future. And the first thing that he says before going into these scenarios is that we have to be awake to the reality that we're facing. Because if we're not fully awake to the reality that we're facing, if we don't open our eyes to it, it's going to be very difficult to avoid the worst of these 4 scenarios that he lays out for us in his book. The first scenario for our future he calls collapse avoidance. Collapse avoidance. This scenario is the best case scenario for our future at the present time. It's a scenario in which we get our collective act together very, very quickly, very effectively, very efficiently, and find a way to avoid ecological and economic collapse. So this is the scenario in which we all come together as societies, nations on the planet, recognize the challenge that we currently have, recognize the fierce urgency of now, and do something about it collectively together on such a massive scale that we are able to avoid economic and ecological collapse. Best case scenario. The second scenario, not so great as the first, but better than the others that are to come, is the collapse rebirth scenario. The collapse rebirth scenario. In this scenario, McLaren says we eventually get our act together, but not as quickly as we need to get it together to avoid a significant economic and ecological collapse. We get our act together, but not before some level of civilizational collapse occurs. The good news in scenario 2, collapse rebirth, is that there is enough left over after the collapse. There are enough human beings and enough resources and enough of our structures left over after this collapse to make a societal rebirth possible. It will be a radically different society than the one we have now, but a society nonetheless. Perhaps a society in which we are humbled, and hopefully a society in which we have gained wisdom from the past collapse to live together into the future in such a way that another collapse will not take place in the too near future. Scenario 2, collapse rebirth. The third scenario, I've already told you it's going to be worse than the second scenario, is what he calls collapse survival. Collapse survival. In this scenario, we don't get our act together and collapse occurs. A major economic and ecological collapse occurs. But a remnant of humanity survives. Human civilization as we currently know it is mostly lost, mostly gone. I have my own name for scenario number 3, collapse survival. I call this the Mad Max scenario or the dystopic future scenario. A scenario that I must admit, given my own lack of survival skills, I would not survive. The fourth scenario is the worst, although some might say, if they're looking at the survival of the planet, maybe some would say it's not the worst, but for us humans, the fourth scenario is clearly the worst, and it is the collapse extinction scenario. In this scenario, we manage to screw things up so badly that humans go extinct. Earth will likely go on, life will likely go on unless we do something extremely crazy with all of our nuclear weapons before we go extinct. But in the collapse extinction scenario, life will likely go on, but humans will not be here any longer. I call this the nice to know you scenario. We will be gone. Now, McLaren, as he's writing his book and he's going through these 4 different scenarios, he asks the reader to reflect on which scenario they believe is most likely to happen, and to think about, where they fall among the 4 scenarios right now, with the realization that they could change, that you can change your mind over time. He says, where do you think you are? So go ahead and think that in your own minds. I think we're probably in scenario 2 would be my personal view on that. But here's something I think that's important that McLaren says to all of us. He says, don't fixate on clinging to only one scenario as an outcome. So if you're in collapse avoidance scenario and you really believe that you're hopeful that we're going to get our act together and we're going to avoid collapse, he says that's not a bad thing. Work for it. Walk into it. Do everything you can to make that happen. But don't fixate or cling to that being the only scenario that's possible. Be aware that these other 3 scenarios are also possible. And I think the reason he wants us to do that is if you're in that collapse avoidance mode and you begin to realize that we're not going to avoid the collapse, it would be easy to fall into despair. It would be easy to fall into hopelessness, but there's still the possibility of collapse rebirth. And if you're in collapse rebirth, don't cling on to that. You may be surprised. Things might get better. We might be able to avoid collapse, but they also could get worse. We could fall into collapse survival mode. And there are ways of being a loving and just and kind and compassionate person, even in the collapse survival scenario that he discusses. But don't even cling to just those top three. It may be the case. It may actually happen that we're not able to avoid the extinction of the human species. Here's some news for us. Eventually, we're not going to be able to avoid the extinction of the human species. There will be a time in the future that the human species will go extinct. We hope it's way, way off in the future. I'd love for it to be caused by the sun expanding. But we know that all things come to an end. Whether it's an asteroid that has our name on it, whether it's some other event, things are going to come to an end. But there are still ways of being loving and just and kind and compassionate persons within community, even as the collapse extinction scenario unfolds. We can still choose to be present with each other with love and mercy and kindness and justice, even in the worst case scenario. The future is open, not completely open. There are factors that are contributing to limitations on the future, but it's still open in many ways. We do not fully know what the future holds. We also must face the reality that much of what will happen is not in our control as individuals, as much as we would like for that to be the case. However, no matter which scenario we ultimately face, there are better and worse ways to face them. McLaren believes that in order to face each of these scenarios in the most loving, in the most just ways, it requires some difficult and challenging inner spiritual work, inner spiritual development. And he outlines 4 steps that he thinks are helpful in this spiritual development. By the way, he likes to work with 4s rather than 2s because he's trying to get away from binary thinking. He's trying to get away from this scenario versus this scenario and realize that there are many different possibilities, and he's not limiting it to 4 either. But in terms of spiritual work, he outlines these 4 ways of moving forward. First is letting go. Letting go. He calls this a path of descent. He says we got to wake up to the reality that we face. We have to let go of the fact that we don't have control over it, and we have to be aware of what is really possible for our future, and that it's really possible that we might not be able to avoid the worst case scenario. We have to be awake to that. We have to be aware of it. Awareness, being awake, is the first step to being able to do something positive about it. The second aspect of this path of spiritual development is letting be. Letting be, which he says is a place for insight, being mindful of our reality and learning as much as we can about it in order to address it in the most loving and most just ways. Letting be, a place of insight. And then the third aspect of the path is letting come, which he calls a path of resilience. finding ways to be more and more resilient in the face of the challenges that the world is bringing our way, in the face of our moving into these various scenarios of collapse. He talks about a time that he's with his grandson, who's not too happy about being left alone with his grandfather for the first time while the parents are away on a date. And he says, when he was a father, he might have said, suck it up, buttercup. But he gained from some wisdom with time and age and was able to be there, be present with his grandchild in such a way that was affirming of his fear and anxiety, but also helped to give him courage. And by the end of the time together, he was telling his grandchild, what happens when the going gets tough? And the grandchild answered, we get tougher. The path of resilience. Being aware of the reality of our fears, being aware of how difficult it is to survive, and finding ways to survive together in human community. And then finally is what he calls setting free, which is a path of agile engagement. At least that's how we say agile in Oklahoma. I know some people say agile. The path of agile engagement. Engaging the world with our gifts and creativity in the most effective ways possible. He says there's not one set path. Each person has their way of walking into the world and walking into the work to create a future with less rather than more doom. So there's no one set path for everyone. But we have to be agile. We have to be creative. We have to bring what we have to bring to the table, what we have to bring to community, to bring about the most effective way forward that we possibly can and have less rather than more doom. So McLaren provides a vision. He provides a vision for being good, for being loving and just and kind, even in the midst of doom. If we do this, he says, we just might find our way out of the doom together. But this is important. Even if we don't find our way out of the doom together, we will have brought love. We will have brought light. We will have brought justice into the world. And that's something. That's something. At this time, we have an opportunity for giving. Those who may wish may bring their gifts to the table, and there's also opportunities to give online.
Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, freedom is coming. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, freedom is coming. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, freedom is coming. Oh, yes, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, freedom is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Justice. Yes, justice is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Justice. Justice is coming. Oh, yes, I know. coming. Oh yes, I know. Oh, freedom is coming. Oh, freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love alive. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound. Corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
Let us stand in body or spirit for a closing thought and the extinguishing of the chalice. Our closing thought comes from Catherine Hayhoe. She says the future we collectively face will be forged by our own actions. We cannot afford to be stopped by fear or shame. We must act with power, love, and a sound mind. Together we can save ourselves. Let us join together in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. Those we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming. Oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming. Oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming. Oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know. Oh yes, I know. Oh yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know. Oh yes, I know.